Hi guys, it is just another gray, gloomy, depressing day here in the collapse of global industrial civilization on Friday morning, April 5th, 2019. So I have got to head back into the ninth ring of hell, which I'm not going to get into. You can find that story elsewhere here in the Doomosphere. I do want just to make clear if there's any rumors about my PayPal account, I want it to be so everyone knows the PayPal account at collapsechronicles@gmail.com is very much alive and well, and I absolutely appreciate anybody who has ever found it in their hearts and wallets to donate to my PayPal account. And so any other rumors you've heard to the contrary about what's going on with that other channel's PayPal account does not affect Collapse Chronicles, and I do greatly appreciate anybody who's ever made a donation to my work here on YouTube. That little disclaimer out of the way. Be fairly short and sweet this week. I received an email yesterday from Rupert Read. If you're not familiar with who Rupert Read is, I have an interview with him. Anyway, Rupert Read, Jim Bendell, who's someone I need to talk to, and John Foster have written an open letter to David Wallace Wells. I think you're probably familiar with David Wallace Wells. Everyone else in the Doomosphere has already interviewed David, so I'm not even inviting David for an interview because you can find a million other interviews with David Wallace Wells. But anyway, so Rupert and Jim and John have penned an open letter to David Wallace Wells, and Rupert has asked if I could share this with the listeners of Collapse Chronicles, and I will do just that, because I would sign my name to this open letter to David Wallace Wells too. Take it away, Rupert, Jim, and John. As a group of British academics and others who think and write about dangerous anthropogenic climate change, we have been impressed by your new book, The Uninhabitable Earth, A Story of the Future. This already best-selling book, like the viral article in New York Magazine from which it grew, states with passion and eloquence the hard truths of our current global plight. Far from being irresponsibly alarmist, as some have alleged, your straight look at oncoming disaster offers a vital stimulus to realistic understanding and action. We are so pleased that your book is receiving the mass attention it deserves and is thereby making the very real risk of an unprecedented climate breakdown and consequent societal collapse comprehensible to the general public. As one of us has stated in a published review, however, we also fear that your book may lead people to believe that the unprecautionary deployment of geoengineering is the answer to our predicament. We are unconvinced by your claim that because we engineered, and we, meaning humans, engineered this mess, so we must be able to engineer an escape from it. While that might be a neat journalistic turn of phrase, it is logical nonsense. Climate change was not intentionally engineered by humanity. The self-reinforcing feedbacks that are now further heating our world show us how complex living how the complex living system of planet Earth is beyond direct human control. So we have no precedent for humanity intentionally engineering global change. We understand that you may wish to offer your readers some hope. However, your argument offers a continuing license for the hubris which has led humanity into climate change peril in the first place. You point out that since, quote, a decarbonized economy, a perfectly renewable energy system, a reimagined system of agriculture, and perhaps even a meatless planet, close quote, are in principle possible, we have, quote, all the tools we need, close quote, to stop tragedy in its tracks. And yet, that would require us, as you also sardonically note, to rebuild the world's infrastructure entirely in less time than it took New York City to build 3 new stops on a subway line. It is dangerous to hang on to such an unrealistic hope while not making adequate preparations for the likelihood that it, meaning your unrealistic hope, will prove groundless. Really facing up to climate reality, by contrast, means giving up all hope of solutions without giving up on hope itself. Instead of fantasies of one world command and control salvation, we believe that the uninhabitable earth should wake us all up to the need for what one of us, meaning Jim Bendell, has recently and influentially named a deep adaptation agenda. This involves building a resilience, both physical and psychological, learning to relinquish long-held beliefs and aspirations, such as that in uninterrupted progress, and the attempted restoration of attitudes and practices which our carbon-fueled way of life has so dangerously eroded. Such an approach, while recognizing the certainty that the civilization which has brought us to this point is finished, accepts also that we cannot know in advance what fine human and societal possibilities may emerge from the crucible of this very recognition. The irony of your starkly titled book is that it ends up being, from our perspective, too optimistic. This may blind readers to the greatest new need now for deep adaptation, that is, for accepting that some kind of eco-induced societal collapse is now not merely possible but likely, and preparing for it, for recognizing that while it is absolutely vital to continue to seek to mitigate our society's climate deadly emissions, the time is past when it was credible to fixate on doing this while ignoring the increasingly urgent need for deep adaptation. What we draw, and should like others to draw, from your urgently necessary book is difficult, but we believe a genuinely realistic message of hope. It is not that acknowledging the hard truths which you present so starkly might still enable us to avoid climate disaster. For that it is, as in practice you so clearly demonstrate, now too late, meaning it's too late to avoid climate disaster. Rather, it is the hope that through accepting the inevitability of such disaster for our present civilization, we may yet find our way to genuinely transformative change, capable of avoiding terminal catastrophe for humanity and the biosphere. The sooner we realize that humanity will not have a Hollywood ending to climate change, the more chance we have to avoid ours becoming a true horror story. We invite you to think with us about what facing up to climate reality now really means, and in particular to enter into the deep adaptation agenda. We look forward to your response. So who are these authors? Rupert Read is a reader in philosophy at the University of East Anglia. Jim Bendell is professor of sustainability leadership at the University of Cumbria and author of the paper Deep Adaptation. And John Foster is co-chair of Greenhouse and author of After Sustainability. There you go, and we will all wait to hear what David Wallace Wells has to say to those fellows. But in the meantime, while we're waiting for that response, I've got to wrap up today's Chronicle of the Collapse and head back to my Planet Eating Bank, where I spent 5.5 hours yesterday and probably will spend another 5 hours today trying to deal with my own little collapse of global industrial society. Get out there and start practicing some deep adaptation, meaning that, which is another way of saying get out there and enjoy it while you still can. Bye, guys.
Hello and welcome to the Hopium Wars, a new series on going south. And for this first episode, we'll look closer at David Wallace Wells. David is a New York City boy who admits he never thought much about nature before something like 2015, a couple of years before he came out with his famous article in New York Magazine. And he's later studied breeding, so he's now become a father while writing the book based on his 2017 article. And he's also done a couple more interviews and written some more articles. So he became famous in 2017, but now it's 2019, so we know a little bit more about Mr. Wallace Wells. So in this mind map, I've sort of included some quotes. The quotes will end with a period mark, and the other blurbs are sort of inferred from things he says and things he means, and sort of summarizes his points. So later on in the series, we will connect some of these thoughts and philosophies to other thinkers and writers. So in the context of hopium, which is false hope, his main frame of thought is that it's never too late in terms of climate change and avoiding the dangerous effects. And the never too late thought is connected to the idea that there's no definite climate tipping point. You know, we can always fix it later, which is the very successful philosophy that humans have followed thus far. We don't have to do anything. Our kids can do it, or we can start doing this in 2070, and we see how that goes. So to find one more thought that is easy to prove that it's absolutely false, one of David's beliefs, we can go up here to every decade will determine the next decade's climate. That is an idiotic statement that somehow implies that the whole planet and the atmosphere will just rinse and repeat every decade, so that he sort of believes that there is no memory, there are no leftover carbon molecules when we enter a new decade. It's all up to us, it's all in our hands as humans. And, you know, of course that's ludicrous, because we have, I think 5 years ago, we entered into the 400 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And obviously they are not going away anytime soon. And for every week that goes, humans have less and less agency and less part of the of even the carbon emission championship, because Earth itself and the Arctic and the tundra and Siberia is very fast coming up and taking over, even as a carbon emitter. So for every year that goes, humans have less and less share of the influence on what is going on. And he has some more ludicrous statements, like how much warming we get is entirely up to us. You know, if that's wrong, then that is also wrong. And yeah, you have like what will happen will be determined by the science of human response. That it's, you know, David is a people's guy. You know, he only cares about, he only understands human beings, and he doesn't understand what is going on in the nature itself, because frankly he doesn't care about nature. He said so himself. It was only a couple of years before he wrote his article that he studied even sort of discovering that the nature was doing its own thing outside of his window. So the science of human response, that's sort of a code word for politics. So if we just choose the other party, then everything will be okay, is David's belief. And this is really, really ludicrous. We can destroy the climate, therefore we can repair it. Yeah, that's like saying if you're able to throw your iPhone into the wall so that it breaks in 100 parts, then that kid or that grown-up who did that, who threw that iPhone, has to be able to repair it. I don't have to prove how stupid that is. And then you have this. It's not a matter of passing a particular threshold beyond which it's all over and the whole world will burn. This is a follow-up from his key belief that there's no definite climate tipping point. And of course there is. For instance, for the ice, the cryosphere on the planet, it's very easy to graph how we started losing ice in the Arctic in the 1960s or 70s, and started losing it in an irreversible way, which is the IPCC definition of a tipping point. So that tipping point was before David Wallace Wells was born. So we then actually passed the main climate tipping point, the main threshold, and even though the entire world doesn't burn in 2019, it is already in the pipe, so to speak. And we can continue with this ludicrous statement. At 4 degrees C, we'll be able to avert 5 degrees C and 6 degrees C. So David believes that we will be at 4 degrees warming since pre-industrial in about 2100, the famous year. But that's not a problem, because then we can just campaign for the Democrat Party and try to avert 5C and 6C with a even newer, even greener no deal. So good luck with that. And the final blurb is in David's mind: I can breed any number of kids, and my chosen representatives will see to it that their lives won't be totally miserable. So with that, I welcome you to view the rest of this video, where we have a audio presentation of David Wallace Wells' famous 2017 article in the New Yorker magazine.